Hi, everybody. I'm Casey Lau, the host of the Hyper Room podcast, and I'm here today to celebrate Comic-Con 2020 at home with Pat Wang from Icon Heroes and comic book writer Frank Tieri. How are you guys doing?
How you guys doing out there?
Doing good, Casey. Staying safe.
Great. We're going to focus this conversation on Frank's Archie series called The Hunger. But first, before we get into that, Frank, you know, I've been reading your comics for almost 20 years now. You broke in at Marvel.
Thanks for making me old.
Well, I'm old too. We're all old. Comics kick over your life for so quickly. I thought the mobster Frank Tieri was writing comics, so that was amazing. But I found out it wasn't. It was just another guy.
Maybe he is.
And tell us a little bit about how you broke in, because when you broke in, you're coming into the early 2000s, and you started working on like the prized possessions of Marvel. You're working on Wolverine, Deadpool, and these characters. Talk to us about how you started off, how you got into the whole business.
I actually started off as an intern. I was an intern for when Bob Harris was editor-in-chief. So I was an intern for him and Ben Rabb. And after my internship, I tried to get a job at Marvel. I did some odd jobs, like I worked in the photostat room, which doesn't exist now anymore, or I did some fill-in editorial stuff. But I ended up at Marvel.com, and I was doing some artwork. I actually started off as an art major, and shows you how good an artist I am. I'm a writer now. So anyway, I started off doing artwork for Marvel.com, and then I eventually. They needed my writing more than they need my artwork. So I started writing for the site. I eventually became an editor for the site. All along, I was pitching Marvel, and Joe Quesada needed a co-writer for, he was working for Marvel Knights at the time. He needed a co-writer for Iron Man. He asked me if I wanted to do it with him. I said, yeah, of course, obviously, duh. And then from that gig, I got Wolverine, and then everything else is history, as they say.
How does it feel to be asked to write Iron Man and Wolverine at such a beginning, early stage? And was it just because you just happened to be in the right place, the right time, or
it's part of it. I mean, a lot of times you're an overnight sensation, an overnight success 10 years in the making, and that was kind of me. I kept always pitching and stuff like that, and Joe knew that I was pitching, but he needed a co-writer, and that was my big break. And then based off the work I was doing on Iron Man, they offered me Wolverine. Then after that, Deadpool, and then so forth and so on, But that I was lucky. First of all, I was writing while I was on staff at Marvel, which they don't let you do anymore, That a lot of people, the way I broke in is basically you can't break in like that anymore. That's but doing the internship was invaluable, because the internship, I made all my connections. I learned how the business worked. And it was a great help in me getting started.
do you think that being in New York is a plus, like being in Hollywood?
Well, how do you know I'm from New York? Is it my accent? Do you think I have a little bit of an accent, maybe? Yeah, I'm from New York, obviously, if you can't tell by my accent. Nowadays, I don't think it matters as much, but back then it probably did help. Again, I think the internship was really what launched it for me, because I learned to know what to do and what not to do. I really learned to know the process. So that was a big help.
Did Joe give you some training? Was he like there to kind of guide you?
He was. I kind of used a similar version of the system Joe initially taught me how to write. I usually use like for a 20 or 22 page comic, I'll break it down. Joe used to use index cards, and on each index card would represent the page, and he would say what was going to happen on each page. I do the same thing, but I basically number a piece, a document 1 to 20 or 1 to 22 or 1 to 40, whatever, how many pages it is. And I'll say on this page, this happens. On this page, this happens. And you just keep breaking down scenes from there. And I still do it, again, a version of that today.
So from there, you started to move and do some work at DC. How does that happen? Is that just because you're in the market and people are looking for your type of writing style?
Yeah, I mean, it was based off. It was after I think Wolverine. I was recruited by Dan DiDio. Dan DiDio recruited me for. I mean, there was always for a while where I was going to go work for DC, not work for DC. You know, I've always been. A lot of people consider me a Marvel guy because I started at Marvel a lot, but eventually Dan DiDio recruited me for a thing called Gotham Underground, and which was basically, you know, if you ever had a meeting with Dan DiDio, it's like having a meeting with the Tasmanian Devil. You know, I walked in there and he's like, okay, I want this in there. I want Batman in there. I want Vigilante. I want Intergang. And it was like a tornado. And and basically that was my first experience in DC, but it was a fun project and it kicked things off for me over there.
How familiar are you with DC or Marvel? You like interim Marvel, so you must have got a good hand on those characters. But going to DC, like, who are some of these characters that you're mentioning? Do you know?
The funny thing is that I grew up a Marvel kid, so my knowledge of Marvel stuff is infinitely more than my knowledge of DC stuff. You know, DC, I know Batman, Superman. You know, but over the years I've learned a little bit more than that. But my Marvel knowledge is, you know, I grew up a Marvel kid. I collected Marvel, you know, until my, you know, I would say 13, 14, 15, like that. And then, you know, I stopped.
So after comics, you started to do some work in video games. How does that, like, how do you transition from comics to video games?
Was pitching, you know, I'm a gamer, so I've done video game stuff. So I was pitching the people at Marvel Games. And it just so happened Marvel vs. Capcom came up 3. They needed a writer. And they approached me for it. It went off from there. And I've done a number of video games since then.
Marvel versus Capcom. That's a crazy. It was a great story.
It was a lot of fun. It was a great video game. You know, and it was working on video games is a different experience than working on comics. Comics is more, you know, you and the editor. When you work with a video game, there's a lot more things involved, different people involved, and you know, like case in point, you're writing sometimes the gameplay. You know, you're writing just dialogue at other times. So it's a different, and there's a lot more chefs involved. So it's a different animal, but also fun but on a different level.
That's interesting. So then at some point, you're kind of getting a reputation to be the writer who is very action-oriented, maybe a little horror-ish, leaning this way. How do you get involved with Archie, of all companies?
Okay, so Archie, actually, it was Alex Segura who brought me in. We were online for a Marvel screening for one of the Spider-Man movies. I think it was the one where... I think it's the third one, the one that's not that great. But anyway, me and Alex are online waiting, and he was just started at Archie, and he wanted to revive the Dark Circle characters. And he said, you know, I'd like you to come, you know, pitch for us on this. Would you have any list of the characters? And I'll be perfectly honest, I don't know any of those characters at all. And I looked down the list and I saw, oh, here's Hangman. How about him? And I pitched Hangman. We did a limited run on it. And then when that ended, when the president, Mike Pellerito, wanted me to do something else. And he said, you know, what other ideas do you have? And I said, well, the horror stuff seems to be doing pretty good for you guys. What if I pitched the horror book? He's like, go ahead. You know, we were sitting in, it was in San Diego. Oddly enough, because this is the week that would be San Diego. We were in San Diego at Roy's drinking Mai Tais, eating dinner. And not Mai Tais, I'm sorry, Moscow Mules. Which, when you want a crazy idea to pitch, fill your editor with Moscow Mules. So what happened then after that was he said, "What do you would you like to do the horror stuff?" And I said, "What if Jughead, because of his hunger, was actually a werewolf?" He said, "Send me a pitch," and it all went from there.
That I've just read the one shot that you came up with, and I was like, this totally makes sense. But I also, you think that Archie's been around for so long, they're not really, trying to mix it up. They've made their money and their reputation on these kind of teen books that are aimed at, like, I don't know, preteen girls, things like that you find in the supermarket. And now they're really pushing the envelope, getting a lot of really big creators to come in and do stuff that they wouldn't do maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago, right? Now they seem to be very experimental. What do you think? How was the reception to this amongst the fan base and the comic people that are reading it today?
Well, it's good enough that you guys they made a statue out of it. So, but yeah, no, fans really dig the horror stuff. The horror stuff has been a lot of fun. Archie has reinvented itself in many different ways, which I think they've had to kind of do. I think it can't be all sock hops and soda shop. You know what I mean? I think you look at Riverdale, the TV show, you look at Sabrina, you look at all the different things they're doing. It's still at the heart, it's still the character, but it's in a different light and it's a different place. And it's been a lot of fun to play with.
So where do you draw the inspiration for when you're developing the Hunger, the first one shot? Are you already like a big werewolf fan? Are you looking at Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Like, where does this stuff come from?
Werewolves are my favorite monsters, probably. It's all classic. The horror. They had, the Archie with the zombie stuff, but they didn't have a classic monster movie and book. And to us, that was our classic monster movie book. Was the troubled teen, the reluctant hero that doesn't want to become the monster, but it happens anyway. Look at all the classics. Lon Chaney Jr., the classic The Wolfman, The Howling, American Werewolf in London. I'm a big fan of all that stuff.
So I guess the one shot was kind of a test to see if there was an appetite for this kind of product. And I guess there was, since you've developed the whole series. Talk about how you got the feedback from Archie, and then how did you say, oh, is there enough material here for an ongoing?
Well, the way they did it, I think they did a few one-shots, I think 3 or 4 one-shots. And they said the ones that was received the best would get an ongoing series. And that's what happened with Jughead. We got really great response to it. And from then on, they called me up and said, okay, we want to do an ongoing now, and we did about 2 seasons. And then, we'll see what the future holds, if, what form it'll reappear in.
So, Pat, let's talk to you about your statue here. Obviously, you found this to be quite a popular series and decided to make some product from specifically the Hunger. Talk about what you're making and what are you launching now?
So the horror genre is pretty popular, obviously, as Frank mentioned. There's a huge fan base for the horror stuff, and when we saw that there was this horror aspect to the Archie, we're fans of Archie comics and Riverdale and those shows, but to see this horror stuff coming out was pretty cool. So right when I personally saw the Jughead, the Hunger art, that's one of the first things I wanted to make. I just thought it was this really cool take of horror genre mashed up with your classic Archie. So we did the Jughead, the Hunger statue. This is coming out very soon, actually. It should be in comic shops really soon. It stands over 10 inches tall. It's made of resin. And this is our regular version, but we also have a San Diego Comic-Con version that we're doing. It's a black and white version. They're all limited edition. They come with certificate of authenticity. Yeah, so anyway, we're doing this, and we're also doing the Vampironica statues. And some of the other ones that we are having the pipeline is we want to do the Betty Cooper version, because she's kind of like that Buffy the Vampire Slayer type character,
exactly,
right, Frank?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So we thought that would be pretty cool to have something like her. And you have Reggie, who's also became a werewolf. Actually, Frank, I want to ask you, like, what went into picking which characters were going to be which heroes, which villains, because you have so many different characters in the Archie universe.
Well, I knew I wanted Reggie to be the main villain. Him and Jug, Reggie's a bully character, and him and Jughead, never were great friends, but you know, I always Betty was like the breakout character of the. It's funny because you mentioned Betty. Betty's the breakout character of the book because, she, you know, she is, you know, very much modeled after Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you know. But I thought, you know, Betty is the sweet, nice character that, you know, everybody loves. But what if that was all of it's just an act, and she was really this badass monster hunter? And I thought that was fun to play with. And you know, Betty is the most badass character in the whole cast. And fans are really taken to Betty. So I'm glad you're doing a statue of her. I think that's a good fit.
Yeah. And what about choosing like other characters? Like you had, you know, Mitch be the Frankenstein of the
Frankenmoose.
Frankenmoose, yeah.
Well, first of all, it sounds good, Frankenmoose. You know, I always like Big Moose. I like big muscular you know, the big characters. Also, you know, I wanted to do a classic, you know, like again, drawing inspiration from the classic monster movies, Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. So, you know, I want to bring in, have that element. We have, you know, Dilton's clone as the Mad Doctor and stuff like that. It's fun to take these characters and populate them in these classic monster tropes and see them in different forms, you know?
Yeah. And then you also had to kill off some fan favorites, right? Like,
well, I killed off, here's the thing, okay? The very first few pages of the one shot is Miss Grundy getting her head chopped off by by werewolf Jughead. There's a reason for that. I want to show the audience that, you know, hey, this is not your father's Archie. This is a very different animal, you know, and so to speak. And fans took to it right away, thankfully.
No, but you know, Archie Andrews is the main character, but he's kind of not the main character in this series, so to speak. He's not really the hero. He's not the villain. He's just kind of like a sidekick to what Betty's doing, right?
Well, I kind of have Archie. Archie's the guy. He's the most screwed out of everybody because he's the guy caught between the two worlds. He's, you know, he's still Archie. He's still the character of Archie. You know, he's still a good guy. He's still my mind guy. But you know, here's his best friend, who's a werewolf, and here's his other best friend, is a werewolf hunter. And you know, the poor guy's caught in the middle. So you know, he doesn't. You know, do I have to? You know, he joins the hunt for when Jughead goes on the run. Am I going to kill my best friend? Am I going to stop my other best friend from killing my best friend? He's got this terrible dilemma throughout the series. You know, and Archie in many ways is our point of view, because you have this monster character and you have this monster hunter, and then you have Archie, who's just a regular guy, and he's like, what the hell is going on here? You know what I mean? My whole life is turned inside out, and he's been having some tough choices to make, and not in such an easy time of it.
And then what was the process in choosing Hiram Lodge as to be the kind of that behind the scenes mastermind, I guess, you know?
Because he's a scumbag, and Mr. Lodge has always been a scumbag, and you know, he fits that mold. It's funny because in Vampironica, which I also write, I did the series on the latest series for Vampironica. He's kind of a different character than what we have him in whatchamacallit, in Jughead the Hunger. And Jughead the Hunger revealed that his family has a history with werewolves, that his uncle's life was destroyed. Basically a Chapacadwick type thing where, you know what I mean? He got involved with the death that wasn't his fault because due to a werewolf, and it kind of ruined his life. And so the Lodge, Mr. Lodge has been behind a lot of these things that we weren't aware of. He's behind the Milton clones. He's behind the he's got a connection with the Cooper clan. So he has and now that his daughter has become a werewolf and accused of being the Ripper in the books, he has a vested interest in clearing her name and coming after Jughead.
So I want to ask you that. So with Vampironica, right? So in Jughead the Hunger, she's a werewolf.
Uh-huh.
And then you kind of spin off into the Vampironica versus Jughead the Hunger series, where now she's a vampire. So
Well, it's two different worlds.
Right.
The Smallwoods did the original series, and then we did the crossover.
Right.
And the crossover was basically a merging of the two worlds. There's this character, Archie character called Jinx, and we made it so that there was a book that she got a hold of, basically the Lost Book of Satan, and it caused the rift between a portal between the two worlds, and everything started to merge. Hence was enabled the crossover between Vampironica and Archie. And then we've seen all sorts of other worlds start to merge, like Sabrina's world with the Afterlife with Archie crew, and Josie and the Pussycats, and there's all sorts of different things started to merge and go out of control. And in the crossover, the two the Archie guys and Jughead and Vampironica had to fix everything.
Has there ever been any talks of bringing your work into the live action? Because actually, Riverdale and Sabrina are pretty dark themselves.
There has been talk. I've had conversations with them. They talked about maybe a Halloween special. They talked about maybe some other things. You know what I mean? If it happens, I wouldn't be. I don't think it's not happening right now. But if it did happen, I wouldn't be surprised. Let's put it that way.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the creative process. Like when you work with Michael Walsh on that first issue, are you guys working very together, or is he just an artist assigned to you? And the coloring, I have to say, it's extremely doesn't look like an Archie book. This is like a very, very atmospheric. There's obviously a lot of thought put into this. Can you talk a little bit about that part of it?
The coloring has been a great job on the one shot and on the regular series as well. Matt does a great job on that. He does very monochromatic, and it really pops. Well, we didn't know what we were getting into at the beginning. Mike is look. I always like to have a very collaborative process with my artists. I always find that works best. So they're always free to give me suggestions and stuff like that. And sometimes when an artist will come up with an idea, it's better than what you came up with. My attitude is always best idea wins. So it doesn't matter where it comes from. If it's a better idea than what you had, then that's what you go with. And me and Mike, we really got along great. He was doing a Star Wars project, so he wasn't able to do the regular series, but he did a great job on that one shot.
You were talking just a minute ago about, you have Vampironica, you have Sabrina, all these different characters. Do you have like a giant wall in your office that basically plots out the next year?
Like I'm a serial killer or something, where I got all these pictures. No, I do not. But yeah, sometimes it's hard to keep track of what everything is going on as far as that goes. But we managed to keep everything. This is this universe, this is that universe. It became more of an issue when I did the crossover, because you have different versions of Vampironica and Veronica, different versions of Betty, and so forth and so on.
What is the how do you compare working with Archie, Marvel, and DC in terms of editorial? How much they influence what you're doing? How much they work with you? How much they let you do what you're doing? Is it based on maybe on how mature you are as a creator now?
Well, I pretty much Archie. I got a lot of freedom on Archie. I got news for you, but there's things that they could do and not do. Sometimes things they're doing on the show, you have to keep into account and so forth. It's different now than it was. Even in Marvel and DC, you work on these properties, and you keep in mind these properties aren't. You're not working in a vacuum. There's television shows, there's TV, there's movies, there's so forth and so on, and it all comes into play. But Archie's a smaller company than Marvel and DC, but it's similar. As long as I have good editors, if you have a good editor, it doesn't matter which company they're working for.
What's in your future What are you working on now, and what are you looking to work for in the future? And how is the COVID affecting you as well? Sorry, that's like 3 questions, but I'm sure they all will come together.
Look, as you've mentioned, and as if you can't tell by my accent, I live in New York. It's different here now. In the very beginning, it was very scary. I have a daughter who has medical issues, so she has immunity issues. So we've had to take extra precautions, especially in the beginning. In the beginning, if I left the house at all, I'd be dressed up like a Tuscan Raider. You know what I mean? Very limited going into stores and stuff like that. But it's gotten a little bit better here. I've braved out, but I leave the house with a mask, and we're always sanitizing and stuff like that. We're very cautious here. But thankfully in New York, it's gotten a lot better than it was. In the early days, it was like, it was ground zero in the early days. And now it's thankfully we've done a good job containing it, and it's gotten a lot better here.
How did all that affect, remember Diamond shut down for a while there? How did that affect maybe your business and the work that you were doing at this time?
Well, there were some things that shut down, some things that didn't. You asked me what's next. I'm working on metal stuff for DC. I have one thing that's announced, and I have some other stuff that hasn't been. So I'm working on the metal thing. I finished off the Ravencroft series I did for Marvel. So there's that. I have other stuff that's coming in the way of Marvel too that haven't been discussed yet. The Archie stuff I was doing Super Duck, and I was doing another Archie project that's on hold for now, but we'll pick up eventually. So it depends, and I'm doing a project for Aftershock coming up. So it depends. Like I said, some things stopped, some things didn't.
Interesting. Were you going to go to Comic-Con this?
Of course, I go every year, and and I'll be the one to say it. I'll miss going to Comic-Con this year. It's everybody goes and they complain and this and that, but you know what? This year I would give anything to be there, for things to be normal and be able to go there again.
Well, the fans would have loved to have had you at the show to sign the statues.
I would have loved it, dude. I mean, if we can't do it in this year, maybe we could do it in another time. But I would have loved to have done it.
Yeah. So Frank, you worked with Marvel, Capcom. Now that you're with and you're doing all this stuff with Archie, who would have been your ideal if you could do a mashup with Marvel and the Archie universe and DC and the Archie universe? Who would you have liked to have put in there?
Well, I think, from you doing the horror stuff, you could put classic horror characters, put Blade into that world, put, Dracula, their version of Dracula. You could put Werewolf by Night. It would be fun to play with any of those characters, Marvel-wise. DC, same thing, put some of those monster characters in there, Man-Bat. Put in some of those, Zatanna, have
Swamp
some fun
Thing.
with Swamp Thing. Yeah, it's a Man Thing, that all that stuff would be great. Legion of Monsters, all that stuff would be great to play with.
That's a great question. That was a great question, Pat. Let's hope Marvel and DC listen to this, because that'd be amazing to read.
Yeah.
It's like a fanboy dream.
Sure, of course.
No, it's good. Yeah, we appreciate your time, Frank. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you guys, and thanks for you. You guys did a great job with the statues.
Thank you. Yeah, you'll be getting yours soon.
Good. Looking forward to it.
Okay, stay safe, Frank. Thanks a lot.
Take care, guys. Stay safe too. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.